Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'll be showing you guys how to tint your brows at home. Yes, brow tint at home DIY. So you'll need brow tint and developer. The tint can be whichever color that you want. It can be black, it can be brown, or you can mix both if you don't want it too dark or too light. You'll need your applicator brush and your spoolie, cotton wool or cotton pads or earbuds, anything with cotton, and your mixing bowl or something that you'll mix your dye and developer in. Right now I'm using what I use for my lash glue, so yeah, don't judge. So I like my color mixed, so I normally mix my black and my brown. So I go ahead and add my developer to my dye. You don't want to add a lot of this. You want to add a little bit of dye and a little bit of developer, okay? Depending on how much of the dye you want to use, but a little goes a long way when it comes to dye. I then go ahead and add my black because I love my colors mixed. It gives me control of how dark or how light I want the dye to be instead of just buying a chocolate brown color or buying a dark brown color. I can at least control the quantity that I want and the look that I'm actually going for. I then go ahead and mix it together and let it sit for a while I work on my brows. So let's talk about my reasons of loving brow tint. So I got tired of always having to draw my brows every time I'm going out or going to work or preparing for a special occasion. So I prefer tinting my brows because they at least last a bit longer. I don't like this effect of all drawing my brows, having my makeup on, then the next day I look completely different because I have no lashes on, I have no brows on. Yet the night before I was all slayed up. So having brow tint, I know that it will last me for a week or two or a couple of days, depending on the brand that I used that day or the quantity that I used. So yes, brow tint maximum lasts for 2 weeks, minimum 2 to 3 days. It also depends on your skin type. It depends on if you bath properly. When we say don't let water touch your brows, we mean do not let water touch your brows because it starts removing the brow dye bit by bit, okay? So now after a few minutes, I then apply my tint. I apply it from the back, well, we call it the tail, working my way to the front. So how am I applying it? I am dapping it onto my skin, pressing it down, okay? Making sure that I'm focusing on it staining my skin first before I brush it on my hair. This is hard if you're doing it on yourself. It's easier when you're working on a client, but because I'm teaching you guys how to do it, we're gonna learn. What I do on the left, I do on the right. So making sure that I'm staining my skin, then I'm going to spread the rest onto the hairs. Hairs are easier to dye than skin. Some people's skin don't get dyed very easily and also depending on the brand. So be careful, especially when buying the type of dye that you want or the brand. Just make sure that it's a good brand and don't feel some type of way if the dye doesn't stain your skin or your hair or doesn't work for you. It just means you need to try a different dye. Okay. So the reason why we work from the tail going forward is because we want the end of the brow to be darker and more tinted than the rest of the brow. Well, I like my brows ombre shade, so I like it to have that ombre effect where in the front it's just light and looking all natural, then it's all dark at the end. This also helps me because my hairs aren't so much towards the end, which is the tail of my brows. So making it more darker just makes my brows look more fuller at the end and it just looks beautiful. And that's the nice part about brow dye is you can do any type of style you want. Yes, there are different styles that you can do and different ways that you can tint your brows. So you can work or you can do whatever style that works for you or that looks good on you. Okay, so as you guys can see, I'm going back to where I started because with the type of dye that I'm using, I need to build the product on. So I use light strokes of the dye and I build on the product. That's how the dye works. Some dyes you don't need to build on the product, some dyes you do. So just know the brand you're working with and the type of dye that you're using or that you're working with, okay? So I go ahead and just build on at the end and then I'll start working my way to the front. So the longer you let the dye sit on your brow, the darker it gets, okay? And the longer it's gonna stain your skin. So making it last a bit longer. So sometimes it's not about the type of brand you used or your application. Sometimes it's about how long you let it sit. Some dyes take longer to work on the skin. Some dyes are quicker, okay? So goes back to what I said. Just make sure you understand the brand that you're using and the type of dye that you have, okay? So as you guys can see, I go ahead and clean the end of my brow, which is the tail again, just to make sure that it's as sharp as I want it to look and to make sure that I just clean up around the brow so that it's giving a nice crisp look that is just seamless and smooth and looks even because you want to make sure that it looks good because you know with dye once it's dyed you can't clean it. If there's a stain, honey. You're not going to be able to fix it. So it's best to always fix it immediately before it actually stains your skin and gives you a crooked line or gives you like a brow shape that you don't want or that's not even or that you don't like. Okay. Don't forget that what you do to the left, you do to the right. So I was just adding product again, building the product on my other brow just to make sure that it's even and it's the same on both brows. So one other thing that you need to know about brows is that they are not twins, they are sisters. So are there people with perfect brows? Definitely. There are people that have same brows, left side looks exactly the same like the right side. But most of us, we do not have brows that are the same. It's either one is higher than the other one, or one is longer than the other one, or one is curvier or has a nice arc than the other one. Maybe one is straight. So brow problems are there and it's not a bad thing. You shouldn't be ashamed about it. We all have these issues. So if you know you're one of these people, what I would advise you to do is to first trim your brows. Why? This will make you and help you get really close to making them look similar. Okay? So you know that, okay, they're nicely shaped. You know where you're going to add a lot of tint or where you're going to add less tint. Some brows, one is darker than the other one. So you know that on the lighter brow, you'll make the tint stay less longer than the other side of the brow, okay? So it just helps you with certain problems. Like my brows, one is shorter than the other one. And the other one has a nice arc than the other one. And one in front is more darker because of a certain surgery that I had. So I don't know if you can see it here. This one is a bit darker because of the scar that is in front. And I also have like a, how can I put it? A scar that makes it look a bit lighter. So I make sure I add enough product in that section to just make the hairs a bit darker and to hide the scar just a little bit. Normally it doesn't really work, but it does something. I mean, there's gonna be a bit of coverage there, but of which I don't mind because I've accepted the problem that I have with this brow. So I love how it looks every time. So let's talk about my girlies that love getting a lamination before a tint. And let's just say you already know how to laminate your brows at home by yourself. I would suggest that if you've just gotten a lamination or your brows laminated, then do not leave the dye on longer than 10 to 15 minutes. Make sure that you read the product that you're going to be using, read the instructions and stuff, because you don't want to cause any damage to the hair follicle and your skin, because your brow and your skin would have been exposed to a certain chemical. They are pretty fragile at this stage. So you just want to leave the dye on for a few minutes just to get them stained and dyed, of which they are going to pick up on the product really quickly. And then you're going to dye them. Leave them on for 8 to 10 minutes. I repeat, because the danger of leaving them on for a long period of time can cause damage, and we do not want that. And I would suggest, if maybe you've just cleaned your brows or tweezed your brows, don't get a tint immediately after that, because you have open wounds and you don't want to damage your cells where you're going to apply the dye. So just make sure maybe you first heal, leave your brows for like 1 or 2 days to just completely heal, and then you can dye your hairs or your brows. So like I said, I like a more ombre effect for my brows. So sometimes I just add dye on the tail and in the middle of my brow. Sometimes I add a bit of dye. Oh my goodness. I add a bit of dye. What is happening to my English? I add a bit of dye in front and then wipe it off after like 5 minutes, depending on how light I want it to look. Sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes, depending on the look that I'm also going for. So yeah, and here I'm just cleaning up the front because it seemed as if one side was longer in front more than the other one. So I just wanted them to begin in the same spot, in the same area. So I'm just cleaning up at the top and at the bottom. Under normal circumstances, if you shape your brows before you tint them, you won't have this problem where you need to go over certain spots that you missed and stuff. So I don't know what happened to the part where I wiped the front of my brows for that ombre effect, but the side that I'm starting with worked perfectly. It looked so amazing. I love how it looks, but it's not as dark as I wanted it to look. And right now I'm using my wipes to wipe off the dye. Normally I use cotton pads and I just make them damp with water. But because I've run out of cotton pads, I chose to use my wipes. And this is where I realized that I wasn't shooting the whole time, because the part where I wipe the front of my brows with my earbud is not in the video. But anywho, it's okay. So I loved the brow that I wiped first. I loved how it looked, but now I could see that, okay, it looks a bit different. So I wanted to add just a little bit more dye to make them look a bit darker so that they look the same. And I wanted to add some dye at the end of, well, at the tail of the brow, because I wanted to be dark. Like I wanted a really dark look like the one I had before. I'll just put a picture here because I was just trying to go for that look. Not too dark, but a bit dark, you know what I mean? So I went ahead and just added a little bit of dye in front. I probably let this sit for like a minute or two or three maybe. And also added a bit of product in the middle just to make sure that it's also giving in the middle. because in my eyes, one eye seemed a bit darker than the other one. So I was like, okay, honey, like I need to do something about this before it goes out of hand. You know what I'm saying?